What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette, bringing you the Week 7 picks and previews. This is one of those weeks where you clear your entire calendar, pop up a squat on the couch, get out all the best food, or if you're tailgating with your friends, or maybe you're at the stadium for one of these games, but this is one of those weeks where you need to be tuned in because this could be one of the best weeks of college football that we've had in a long time. But before I get into previewing all these games, giving my predictions, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Starting things out, a huge game, the game of the week to me in the Big Ten, huge game out in Eugene, Oregon. Number 7, Indiana, 5-0, 2-0 in the Big Ten. At number 3, Oregon, same record, 5-0, 2-0 in the Big Ten. Offensively, these teams are nearly identical at quarterback. You've got Fernando Mendoza, the Cal transfer for the Hoosiers, throwing for 1,208 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And then Devin Moore for the Ducks, 1,210 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Statistically looking at things, Indiana has the number 5 total offense, number 5 rush offense, and number 4 scoring offense. Oregon has the number 6 scoring offense, number 9 total offense, and number 11 rushing offense. Indiana, kind of both of these teams, they're really well-rounded on offense, and they do it in a variety of ways. Indiana this season has 4 different guys with over 200 rushing yards. It's led by Roman Hemby and Kalen Black. Lee Beebe is going to be out for this game. But I kind of expect those 2 other guys to pick up the slack from that a little bit. Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are their 2 leading receivers. Surratt, I think, is probably one of the most underrated wide receivers in the country. Oregon, meanwhile, gets carries all over the place. They have, I think, maybe 5 guys that have 10 carries or more. Jaden Limar leads the way with 39 carries. And then they have 3 guys who have over 200 receiving yards: Decorian Moore, Malik Benson, and Kenyon Sadiq. And then they've also got kind of their big guy in the red zone and on finding the end zone, Gary Bryant Jr., who's just under that 200-yard mark with 197 yards and 4 touchdowns, catching 1 in each of the 4 games he's played in. Those 3 guys I also mentioned earlier each have 2 touchdown receptions each. Defensively, these teams match up really well. Also, Indiana has the number 5 total defense and number 7 passing defense, number 13 scoring defense, or number 3 scoring defense, and number 18 rushing defense. Leading the way for that defense is Isaiah Jones, who has 3.5 sacks. Tyreek Tucker and Mario Landino both have 3 sacks each. Linebacker Aiden Foster is a key guy to watch as well. He's kind of the heartbeat of this defense. And then defensive back Lewis Moore has 30 tackles, which ranks first on the team, and 3 interceptions. You also can't forget about Mikael Kamara and D'Angelo Pons. Pons was big in that 63-10 win over Illinois. He had that obviously blocked punt that he returned for a touchdown. Oregon's defense, meanwhile, number 8 in scoring, number 7 total, number 3 in passing defense. However, they have struggled a bit against the run. They're not, I don't even think in the bottom half of college football, but they're kind of more around that middle ground with 114.8 rushing yards allowed per game. So look for Indiana to potentially try to exploit that. The Ducks, led by Bryce Betcher, 39 tackles, Teatum Tuioti, and Mateo Uagalele. The latter of those 2 guys has 4 sacks. Dylan Thieneman had that big play in that overtime win over Penn State, the interception to seal that win. And then Dalen Austin, Ife Obigdegwu, and Jerry Mixon have 3 pass deflections each. And then Mixon also has 2 interceptions, one of which was returned for a touchdown in that drubbing of Oklahoma State. A potential X factor here is those special teams of Indiana. They have 2 punt return touchdowns this year. That could make a difference, but I think ultimately Oregon, under Dan Lanning at head coach, plays really well at home. I think that continues. I'm going with the Ducks, 34, Hoosiers, 27. Next up, a big top 15 matchup out of the SEC. Number 8, Alabama, who's 4-1, at number 14, Missouri, who's 5-0. This is a marquee win opportunity for the Tigers. Alabama obviously already has that this season. Missouri doesn't quite have that this year. They beat their rivals, Kansas, but I think that's bigger in those 2 states than it is nationally. If they were to get a win here, these 2 teams probably switch spots. Mizzou enters the top 10. Alabama stays in the top 15, I think, but this would be a huge boost for Mizzou. Looking at both of these teams, Alabama has the number 5 passing offense in college football. Ty Simpson right now is playing like probably the best quarterback in college football. He's 111 for 158 this season, 1,478 yards, 13 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. He's got a trio of receivers that he can get the ball to: Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, and Isaiah Horton. His running backs, Jam Miller, he's back for the 3rd game this season, and then Kevin Riley. Mizzou, meanwhile, is number 3 nationally in the rush, number 4 in total offense, and number 7 in scoring. That starts with FBS leading running back Ahmed Hardy, who has 730 yards and 9 touchdowns. He has a 7.1 yards per carry clip. Bo Pribula, the quarterback transfer from Penn State, has put up good numbers this year as well. 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Kevin Coleman Jr. has been his main target, 386 yards and a touchdown. And then tight end Brett Norfleet has been kind of his go-to for getting into the end zone with 4 receiving touchdowns. Defensively, Alabama has the number 21 scoring defense in the nation, number 5 passing defense, which I don't think will play as big of a role because Mizzou doesn't pass the ball a whole lot, but I do think their defense overall does a good job of stopping other teams from scoring. Justin Jefferson has 29 tackles, Bray Hubbard 2 interceptions, 17 solo tackles, and then 2 guys that I think will be huge in trying to slow down that run, LT Overton and Yanze Pierre. Those 2 guys have 3.5 tackles for loss each, so how they're able to get through that offensive line will be huge in this game. Look for both of them to potentially slow down that Mizzou running attack. Mizzou, meanwhile, has probably one of the most underrated defenses in college football. They're number 2 in total defense and number 1 against the rush, allowing just 72.4 yards per game. I don't think that'll be huge in this game, but I think what will be huge is some of these other guys on defense. Josiah Trotter has 6 tackles for loss, 28 total tackles. Damon Wilson II has 3.5 sacks, and then Zion Young has 6 tackles for loss, and kind of an underrated stat in college football, 6 quarterback hurries. So I would look for each of those 3 guys to create a lot of pressure, try to put Ty Simpson, off balance, out of his rhythm, off schedule, in getting those throws out. And then also Dre Norwood, in terms of his coverage, has 4 pass breakups this season, so look for him to try to stymie some of those Alabama receivers. Overall, though, I think Kalen DeBoer is coaching this Alabama team really well. He's already proven this season, after kind of what I think was a blip week 1 against Florida State, that he can win on the road, beating Georgia 24-21. I think it's another win for the Crimson Tide. I'm going with Alabama 28, Missouri 23. Next up, we've got number 1, Ohio State, at number 17, Illinois. The Buckeyes are 5-0, 2-0 in the Big Ten. Illinois is 5-1, 2-1 in conference. This is an offense for the Buckeyes that kind of finally let loose fully last week, kind of opened up the playbook. Ryan Day and Brian Hartline being a bit more aggressive. Julian Sayin at quarterback. Probably the best 1-2 receiver punch in college football. Jeremiah Smith and Cardinal Tate also had huge games, especially Cardinal Tate. And then running backs Bo Jackson has been kind of an emerging star, and CJ Donaldson is the experienced transfer coming in from West Virginia. Have both looked really good. Offensively, Illinois, Luke Altmaier quarterback, 2 of the most underrated, I think, running backs in the Big Ten. Definitely one of the most underrated tandems, maybe even in the country. Khalil Valentine, Caden Fagan are 2 really talented backs, and then wide receiver Hank Beatty. They also have been clicking on offense. They put up 34 points against USC, 43 at Purdue, after obviously just scoring 10 against Indiana. And then Justin Burrick also has 4 touchdowns. So he's been kind of the threat for the Fighting Illini to go to. Defensively, this is kind of a tale of 2 opposites here. Illinois certainly doesn't have a bad defense, but they were taken apart dramatically by Indiana in that 63-10 loss, and even still gave up 32 points to USC, 27 to Purdue. Linebacker Gabe Akis and defensive back Miles Scott are their 2 key guys. But on the flip side, Matt Patricia has just been the perfect hire for the Buckeyes to replace Jim Knowles. He's led this defense, the number 3 total defense, number 4 passing defense, and the number 1 scoring defense, allowing just 5 points per game. I will say, against the run, the Buckeyes aren't the best in the country. They're outside the top 25 there, so look for Valentine and Fagan to kind of get some carries. This is an area the Buckeyes are going to need to address because it's going to be pivotal in that end of the season game against Michigan. But leading the way right now, Caden Curry has emerged. He is a game wrecker on that defensive line, 5 sacks. I think he also leads the team in tackles. You've got one of the most intelligent and talented players in college football, Caleb Downs, in that defensive backfield. And then linebacker Arvell Reese has been one of the top stars, has received a lot of praise. Watch the film, just look at how well he plays and some of the skill sets that he has. I think Illinois does get the offense working a little bit. I think maybe they stick around in this game, but I think kind of the Buckeyes pull away a little bit late. So I'm going with Ohio State 37, Illinois 20. Next up, a game that was a lot bigger both in preseason and even after. Really, I guess up until last week, you got number 6 Oklahoma, who's 5-0, 1-0 in the conference, against Texas, who's 3-2, 0-1 in the SEC. This game is obviously at the Cotton Bowl. It's the Red River Rivalry, Sooners and Longhorns. First question here, is Arch Mania over? He, again, struggled against Florida. He's struggled on the road so far. This is going to be a 50-50 game. So does he have 50% of the struggles here? I guess we'll see. This is a game that you would say is a get-right game because of what happened last week. But normally that word is used when a team is playing kind of a cupcake after a loss or after a game that they struggled in. This is not that. The Sooners have the number 1 total defense in the SEC, number 1 pass defense, number 2 rushing defense, and number 1 scoring defense. So Arch is from one test to another, from playing in the swamp to going up against the best defense in the SEC. This is going to be a tough test. The question here, will John Mateer be available for the Sooners? He's listed, I think, as questionable. There's been kind of some rumblings that he might come back this week. I would be surprised, but I think this is certainly a type of game that you'd like to come back for. Even if he doesn't, or if he still is kind of hampered by that injury. Michael Hawkins looked good last week, certainly looked serviceable. He has some experience from previous seasons as well. He had 4 touchdowns last week, albeit against a lesser opponent in Kent State. I think the Sooners here have a chance to get a big win because they've got a really tough back half of their schedule after this game. This kind of starts the gauntlet for them. They already have that win over Michigan. This would further boost their resume and give them a little more wiggle room. And you also have a chance to probably knock your biggest rival out of the college football playoff picture with another loss here. So I think that's exactly what Oklahoma does. I think, every year there are teams that disappoint. Sometimes it's to larger extents than others. I mean, FSU was like the classic example of the furthest end of the scale, where you expect a team that just made the playoffs to at least be near that again, and they went 2-10. I don't think Texas is to that level, but they haven't quite defensively been as dominant as they were. They've still been good. Statistically, they're pretty good, but they haven't been as dominant. And then obviously the offensive struggles have been very well documented. I think Oklahoma wins 30-23, picks up a huge win over their rivals. Finally, last game I'm taking an extensive look at, number 15 Michigan, 4-1, 2-0 in the Big Ten at USC, who is 4-1 and 2-1. This is a case of two totally different identities. USC has the number 1 total offense and passing offense, led by quarterback Jaden Maiava and wide receiver Makai Lemon, who absolutely went off in that game against Illinois. It wasn't quite enough, but he put together an incredible game there. And this is also the number 1 scoring offense, averaging 48.4 points per game. And then Michigan on the flip side, they've got the number 3 rushing offense, I think, in the Big Ten. And through last week, Justice Haynes, he's been a huge part of that. He leads the FBS, at least through last week, in plays over 40 yards. I think he had 5 going into that game or midway through that game against Wisconsin. So watch for that. Bryce Underwood is starting to put together some good stats as well, really kind of seeming to get comfortable. This is a good kind of second test after that road game against Oklahoma, where, he definitely had some of those challenges to get through. I think it's an opportunity here in what won't be a raucous road environment. If anything, you would expect Michigan fans to travel pretty well out there to Southern California. Defensively, both of these teams are kind of middle of the pack in the Big Ten, which isn't exactly what you would expect in this matchup, maybe. But I think the X factor in this game, to me, is overall the Michigan secondary, but especially Jair Hill. him or Zeke Berry will likely be matched up against Lemon. Hill has 4 pass deflections, 18 tackles. He doesn't have a pick yet. Those picks have gone to Rod Moore last week and some of the other guys in the secondary, but I think this is a huge opportunity for Hill to get that first interception. I'm not going to go out there and say that he will, but I think there's a good chance of it. I think Michigan wins kind of a similar game to what was played last year, maybe a little bit higher scoring. I'm going to go with Michigan 31, USC 27. Finally, rolling through some of these other interesting games, you've got Florida, who's playing well, going to be on a high after that win over Texas at number 5, Texas A&M. Aggies are 5-0. They're rolling on offense. Marcel Reed, Le'Veon Moss. I think the Aggies get a big win here. That gives them a little bit of that wiggle room. They've got a manageable schedule the rest of the way, aside from games at LSU and at Mizzou, while Florida has the rest of their gauntlet to face. And if they lose here, I mean, once again, Billy Napier's job is kind of on the line. I think he bought himself some more time with that win last week against Texas, but another loss here will definitely dial up the heat on his seat. Next up, NC State at number 16 Notre Dame. Kind of highlighting this game because NC State's looked pretty good in ACC play, but the Fighting Irish are rolling. CJ Carr is up there among the best quarterbacks in college football this season. Obviously, they've got that running back tandem of Love and Price. I think the Fighting Irish roll here. Interesting Big 12 game earlier in the day. I'll talk about a couple more later. Kansas at number 9, Texas Tech. Jalen Daniels, Baron Morton, really good quarterback matchup. I think the difference here, though, is the Red Raiders defense led by Jacob Rodriguez. So I'm going with Texas Tech to win this one. Number 10, Georgia at Auburn, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. But I think the Tigers, I mean, this is certainly upset watch material here. I just don't think the Tigers, even with those wide receivers that they have, they're still 3rd worst in the SEC offensively. Jordan Hare is a tough place to go in and play, but I think the Bulldogs do here get a little bit of a bounce back, kind of following that loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago. I know they beat Kentucky, but a good opportunity here to kind of further distance themselves from that loss. South Carolina at LSU. Gamecocks have kind of been another one of those underachieving teams this year. Lenore Sellers hasn't quite looked like what everybody was hyping him up to be this year. Neither has LSU's offense, but I think Death Valley is the advantage here, so I'm going with LSU to win. And then finally, 2 more wins kind of later on in the night that I mentioned already out of the Big 12. You've got number 18 BYU at Arizona, number 21 Arizona State at Utah. Arizona, Noah Fifita looks back to the form that he had a couple seasons ago. He kind of struggled last year. I think a lot of that is probably in large part due to a new coaching staff, even with Tatoiroa McMillan at his disposal last year. I think he's kind of getting back under his feet, getting used to this system and everything, and I think that's been huge for the Wildcats. They've started 4-1, and then Utah has bounced back extremely well with a dominant win over West Virginia after that loss to Texas Tech. BYU and Arizona State, they're 2-3, at least in terms of national rankings in the Big 12 after Iowa State's loss. I think kind of all 4 of these teams are kind of in that second tier behind Texas Tech, who I think is kind of in a tier of their own right now atop the Big 12. And I think here, the home environments will be big advantages here. I'm going to go with Arizona to pull the win over BYU and Utah to pull the win over Arizona State, who's already proven that they struggled on the road so far when they lost to Mississippi State. Finally, the final segment here, going over just a quick little Group of 5 watch. The biggest game in the Group of 5, one of the biggest games, honestly, in the country this week because of the ramifications of having a Group of 5 team in the playoff. Number 24, South Florida, 4-1 at North Texas, who's 5-0, I think should be deservedly knocking on the door of those rankings. South Florida is one of the best at creating turnovers. They have 6 interceptions this year. North Texas, meanwhile, though, is probably the best, most well-rounded team in the American Conference so far. The number 1 in the conference in scoring, the number 3 in total defense, and number 1 in passing defense. I think the Mean Green get the big win here. They put themselves into the running there for that Group of 5 playoff spot. They kind of, I think, with a win here, would put themselves with Memphis as kind of the favorites in the American. So I'm going with the Mean Green. That is all. Those are my picks and previews. Those are my predictions for Week 7. Let me know in the comments below who you think is winning all of these big games and what you think it'll mean for the college football playoff picture. But that's all for this week, this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.